here in Tel Arad. Tel Arad is a huge site composed of two different periods of time. We have a Canaanite city, about 5,000 years old, early Bronze Age, and at the top of the hill we have a fortress that is from the Israelite monarchy, which is the 10th to 6th century BC.
In our series The King's Way, Derech HaMelech, we will visit today Tel Arad, that is a biblical city located in the Neguev desert by the city of Arad. First, let's define what the word Tel Arad means. It is an archaeological term, and mainly the term tel, that defines an artificial mound or a small hill that is formed from the remains, the accumulated remains and layers of different materials of the people who were living on the same site for hundreds or sometimes for thousands of years, like in Tel Megiddo. It is typical of the Near East, and we have many sites in Israel that are called Tel due to the same reason, accumulation of different layers, like Tel Azekah, Tel Lachish, and much more. Arad is mentioned in the Bible in the story of the failed attempt to reach the Promised Land in Numbers 21:1. And it is also mentioned in the list of the Canaanite kings that were defeated by the children of Israel in the book of Joshua, Joshua 12:14. But there exists, however, an historical chronological problem with this biblical account, because there is no evidence that Tel Arad was inhabited during the late Bronze Age. Scholars suggest that the king of Arad, who is mentioned in the Bible, was in fact the ruler of the kingdom of Arad, the Neguev of Arad, as it is mentioned in Judges 1:16. And his capital would have been another city. The city was located at the crossroads of two main trade routes, the one southward from the Judean hills to the Negev and Edom, and the other westward from the shores of the Dead Sea across the Negev to the southern coast. And that really contributed to the prosperity of ancient Arad in the early Bronze Age period. There were a lot of contact with Egypt, attested by the finding of some pottery, and among one with the name of the pharaoh Narmer. So Arad is this city that is in the Negev, is mentioned first in the Bible in the book of Joshua, when we see that Joshua is fighting against some Canaanite kings, and among them he mentions the king of Arad. And then we find it also in the book of Numbers, when the children of Israel are about to conquer the land. They are fighting with the local people, and we find this in number 21, verse first, first verse, when the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, this is exactly where we are standing, heard that Israel was coming along the road to Atarim. He attacked Israel and captured some of them. Then we have the verse that says, then Israel vowed to Adonai, stated, if you deliver these people into our hand, we will put their cities under the ban of destruction. So we have two things. First of all, the name of Arad comes from a root that means reckless, wild. So there is something about this area and the people, the local Canaanite kings. But second, we have a problem, a historical and chronological problem, because this city is dated at the EB, early Bronze Age, and the Joshua conquest is rather at the late Bronze Age. So we have a discrepancy in time, and it doesn't fit. The chronology doesn't fit. There was no Arad cities that has been destroyed in the early Bronze Age at the time of Joshua. So we know that the Bible is not always a chronological or historical route, but gives us message, gives us information for us to understand. And what we can understand here, it was just an area that was wild, reckless. The Canaanite kings were just all over the place, or the the atmosphere of it, the land was hard to conquest. And this is what the Bible is trying to give us as a message. And probably that the king of Arad was not king of this city, Arad, it was not existing at the time of Joshua, but rather of the area. And it was like a reckless and wide area that Joshua had to conquer. So where are we located now? I'm just standing in what we called an Arabian type of house, Canaanite house, which was totally different than later with the Israelite period, where they used to have 4-room houses, for instance. When we will be visiting the city of David, we will see one. Here, this type of house is mainly composed of one main room. You see, this is the main area, living area, sleeping, everything. The kitchen was outside, like in most of these hot regions. And you would see that around on the floor, you have this kind of bench that is going all over the place. That was about the furniture, okay? And in the middle, you have this stone here, which probably was kind of supporting like a pillar, wooden pillar that would support, that would hold the roof that was probably made in wood or kind of bushes, you know, something that didn't last, only the stone last. And the other characteristic feature of this house is the entrance, which was quite narrow because it was hot. And you would come into the main entrance and you would kind of go down, little slope going down into this house to be protected from heat and also from the rain and so. And kitchen was outside.
We are now in the Canaanite city. This wall, after 1,000 years old, 25 acres, a huge city. The wall is 3/4 mile long, 10 feet high, about 2,500 people living inside this city.
We're now located at the entrance of the Israelite fortress. This is the gate, the main entrance gate, which is called Shaul in Hebrew. And we just jumped in time. We are at the Israelite period, where a whole bunch of fortresses have been built and rebuilt on the same spot for 260 years. Around 6 fortresses have been built. Why? Because it was located on a strategic location, and it was mainly a protection against the threat of Edom. The Edomites were attacking. So those fortresses became the prey. Located at this strategic location, they became a prey, and that's the reason they have been destroyed and rebuilt several times in this time period.
We just entered this small fortress, and in an amazing way, the main part located at the back is dedicated to a mini temple, a shrine. That is one of the most important archaeological discoveries of Tel Arad. We know that, according to the Bible, it was forbidden to offer sacrifice outside of the tabernacle and the temple. And here, in the middle of the territory of Judah, we have this temple dedicated to the God of Israel with an altar to offer sacrifices.
Inside the Iron Age fortress, a shrine, including a Holy of Holies, was exposed. The shrine consisted of a small room reached by 3 steps. It includes altars and stela and a large quantity of pottery vessels with traces of fire. Its comparison with the Solomonic temple and the tabernacle is quite striking. There was an east-west axis identical in both the Arad temple, that of Jerusalem, and the tabernacle. There were 2 pillars at the entrance of the Jerusalem temple, and 2 stone bases were found at the entrance of the shrine in Tel Arad. The sanctuary at Arad would be a generally Israelite temple, a house of Yud-Keh-Vav-Keh Adonai. The temple would have been built in the 10th century BC, together with the first fortress. Then the sacrificial altars and the last temple would have been destroyed by the 2 kings who are associated with cultic reforms at the 8th and 7th centuries BC, namely King Hezekiah and Josiah. Its first stage in the days of Hezekiah was the prohibition of sacrifice, while only its second stage, in the days of King Josiah, brought about the complete abolition of worship outside Jerusalem. According to the archaeologist Aaroni, he says that there is little doubt that this was an Israelite sanctuary devoted to the God of Israel. There is little doubt, thus, that this was a royal Israelite sanctuary. Explain us a little bit how this cistern was dug, or how did they bring water inside?
So usually cisterns are collecting water on rainy days or winter that time and rainy days. There is a surface that collects the water and brings the water into the cisterns. Here, because we are at the gate of the Neguev, the desert, it was some years was probably not enough water, enough rain to fill up the cistern. So there, what we found in archaeological, some channels that people, they brought water from the bottom, from the Canaanite city, where there was a well, and they brought water to fill up this cistern in case of attack and in case of a siege.
We also find one of the biggest collection of ostrakas, which is pottery shards, on which it was written in Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, and this really helped us in archaeology to find the proper period to understand what was going on. The letters, most of the letters, they were from the different periods of time of the fortresses, different fortresses. But mainly, the last decades of the existence of the last fortress, we found some letters and dedicated addressed to the commander of the fortress, Eliashib. And one of the most important discovery is one that is consecrated and dedicated to the house of God. And in Hebrew, Yud-Keh-Vav-Keh,
the tetragram, which is the name of God. So this teaches us that this place was not dedicated to a pagan god, but really to the God of Israel.
Tel Arad was not the only place destroyed at the same period. The cultic place of Tel Beersheva was also abolished on a purpose way. The biblical evidence about King Hezekiah's activity at the 8th century is supported by the Assyrian chronology and the exile of the 10 tribes. The northern kingdom had been sent to exile to Assyria because of idolatry, and a remnant had come to Jerusalem to escape. King Hezekiah's cultic reform would have been made in a political goal, that of centralizing the cult of the Judean capital in order to gather and unify the population of the former northern kingdom of Israel.